Okay, so I know that this class, we already talked a little bit about Jamestown. We went through it a little bit already the week before snow. So I'm not going to go back through Jamestown stuff. We covered that. We covered Pocahontas and all that, right? We talked about all that nonsense. And I think mostly what we didn't get to go through, which bums me out, is your textbook talks a lot about Puritans, and then it goes into the Salem witch trials. We didn't get to cover Salem witch trials, which that's one of my favorite things. I love that. There's so many awesome movies and TV shows based on the Salem witch trials. I don't know. There used to be a TV show called Salem. It was a decent show. I don't know, but I just enjoy talking about it. I think it's interesting how people get so like mob mentality that they literally just killed 100 people on the assumption that they might be witches. I don't know. That blows my mind how people can be. Reminds me of the I know y'all seen Men in Black. You seen the original Men in Black? Am I dating myself? I know that's an old movie, but anyway, the original Men in Black, there's a very fantastic quote in that movie that says, men are smart. You know, a man is smart, but men, you get a whole bunch of people together and we're dumb, stupid animals. So it makes me think of that Salem witch trials. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of just go through kind of where I left off. I'm just gonna pick up and start going. And if you have questions, you flag me, wave at me or whatever, and I'll stop and whatever. You just let me know. Okay, so your book goes into a lot of detail about expansion, about population growth, and about the expansion of the colonies, the original English colonies, and why and how they expanded so quickly. And of course, their answer is population. One, and economy is the other big part of that. But population, one, because so many people are coming to the colonies. A lot of people are coming in. Do you remember which groups of people are coming to the colonies at this time? There's a couple specific groups, 3 in particular, groups of people who are coming into the colonies right now. Anybody know? Carter? Do you have your hand raised? Is that what that is? I've never seen that before. I love it. The little hand, is that you? That's adorable. Okay. Are you trying to answer this question or are you just waving at me? I don't know. I can't tell. Okay. All right. The groups of people who are coming into, I don't know, what is that? Oh no, that's mine. Okay. I thought maybe you were trying to answer the question. I was excited. Okay. Groups of people who are coming into the colonies. One, English, still the English, right? We're talking about, which specific groups of people? One, the Scots-Irish. So that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Scotland, Ireland, Scots, Irish. And where do they mostly settle? Do you know where most of the Scots-Irish settle when they come to the New World? Here, they settle in the South. Those are my people. I'm Scots-Irish, Scottish, technically. But yeah, so Scots-Irish, they have a reputation for being fiercely independent and really hardworking and very, what's a nice way to say this? Ready to fight at the drop of a hat? Is that fair to say, I think? Yeah, so good disposition for settling somewhere no one has been. You know what I mean? Like establishing their own identity in a new place. They're bringing their culture with them. So Scots Irish, that's a large group of people who are coming over. The other group of people are the Germans. They mostly settle where? Do you know where the Germans settle? We don't call them German. When they come to the colonies, we call them something else. They get called something else. They're technically German. They're coming from Germany. But do you know what we call them when they come to the United States? And it's not the United States yet, but you know what I mean. When they come to America.
Maybe like Virginia?
They'd settle kind of northern area-ish. But do you know what we call those groups of people? That group of people? There's a name for them. We call them Pennsylvania Dutch. They're not Dutch, but it's a kind of a bastardization of the word that they use for themselves because they speak Deutsch. And so we take that. And so now we call them the Pennsylvania Dutch. So I don't know if any of you have ever been to like the Pennsylvania, Northern Ohio kind of area where they have a lot of Amish, Mennonite families. Most of those families, if they are like old school Mennonite and Amish, then they still speak German because they're Pennsylvania Dutch, or whatever, and they're the Germans who came over and settled, mostly in like the northern colony area. Okay, and then the last group of people. This one should be kind of obvious. Who else? Okay, I don't want to totally give the answer away, but who else is coming into the colonies? Right, not by choice.
Slaves.
Slaves, that's exactly right. And we have a large influx of Africans coming into the colonies. So I think your book gives specifics about how many and how the population breaks down in each of the areas. But I think it says the beginning of it, it says like from 1700 to 1770, the population of the colonies expands like 8 times. It's 8 times as much in 1770 as it was in 1700. And that's mostly because of Germans, Scots Irish, and Africans. Okay. The other thing is, the other part of population increase is we're having babies. People come over here and they start new lives. And if there is steady access to food and a stable-ish living situation, people are going to have babies. So there's large population increase that way as well. And they call it the natural increase in population. So we have lower mortality rates happening. Usually a lady in the early colonies, you don't just have one baby, you're probably having 6, 7, 8 babies before one of them finally kills you. So like, I can't even imagine. Oh, I can't imagine. My great grandmother had 11 children. And to me, that is asinine. I don't know. I can't even fathom having that many babies. And these people are doing it with no drugs. So that doubly blows my mind. Anywho, but these women are having, 6, 7, 8 babies at a time. They give the example of Benjamin Franklin, his family. So his father had 8 kids with his first wife. The 8th one, she died during childbirth. He really quickly remarried another lady and then had 10 more. So Benjamin Franklin's father had 18 kids, one of which was Benjamin Franklin, who left home at 18 because he decided, no, I don't want any part of this. He needed to make his own way. He did, I guess, Okay, so the thing is, lower mortality rates, lots of babies. Usually, if you were a man In the early colonies, if you made it to the age of 20, you're probably going to make it to the age of 60. Those first 20 years are the hardest as a child. Your teenage and childhood years are usually the most dangerous time of a early colonist life. But if you can make it to 20, probably going to make it to 60. So there's that. More people living longer. The other thing is those original colonies, I mean, we don't have any like borders technically yet, right? So land, there's plenty of land available if you want to fight off the Indians. There's plenty of land to spread out into, and that's what we're doing. We're continuing to spread west, west, west. Continue. Okay. But your book goes into a lot of detail, about population increase. It's kind of ridiculous, I think, but whatever. If you want to know the specifics of each colony, it's in there. It's a lot. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about a few of the specific colonies. Mostly, there are just a couple I really want to focus on. But again, this is all in your textbook and they have a lot of specifics about it, but I'm just going to highlight, okay? First, let's talk Carolinas. So 2 parts, obviously. It didn't used to be North and South Carolina. It was just Carolina originally, but there's 2 parts to the Carolinas. The North was settled in about 1650 from people from Virginia. They scooted down into the Carolinas. Soon recruited people to bring the sugar plantation model to the Carolina colonies. So they are setting up basically the plantation system in the Carolinas pretty early, as early as 1650. Along with that plantation model comes the African slavery. In 1666, I have a quote here. These settlements have been made and upheld, by Negroes, and without constant supply of them, we cannot subsist. So that basically lets you know what kind of colony and the economy of the Carolinas. That's essentially what's happening in the Carolinas in the beginning. It's a plantation system, and most of their economy is based on slave labor. Not only importing them and buying and selling them, but also working on the plantations and the goods that provides. So they officially divide into North and South Carolina in 1712. Half of the population in 1720, half of the population in 1720 is slaves. So we're talking like the economy essentially is based on this slave labor. So middle colonies, we're talking about the area between New England and Maryland. So like New York, New Jersey, Delaware, the little Pennsylvania. New York originally starts as the New Netherlands. It's a Dutch colony. It's older than the English colony. It's established first before the English colony. And established by the Dutch East India Company in 1602. They hired an English sea captain named Henry Hudson, right? Hudson River, Henry Hudson, to explore America in hopes of finding a passageway to the Indies. So same deal as Columbus. He found the Delaware Bay and then sailed up into what is now New York. New Amsterdam was the capital and the Dutch post, and it is by far the most diverse of the colonies to begin with, because they have so many people coming in and out, merchants mainly. So we're talking Dutch, Swedish, Norwegian, Spanish, English, Africans, both free and enslaved, Germans, Finnish people, this becomes important later, but a huge colony of free Jewish people. So pretty early on, New York establishes a very large Jewish population. They still have a very large Jewish population in New York. So they established themselves pretty early. in New Amsterdam. But then in 1664, the English take it over. So it becomes essentially an English colony. In the 1660s, they basically take it over. They don't really fight for it, but they kind of fight a little bit, but then the Dutch finally agree, you know what, fine, just take it, give us some money and you can just have it. It's fine. So, okay. And then the last one I want to talk about is, second to last one I want to talk about, Georgia. So Georgia is the last colony to be founded. It's the last of the English colonies to be established. It starts as, well, do you guys know? What does Georgia start as? It doesn't start as a regular old colony. It starts as something else. Anybody have any idea? Do you know?
Didn't it start as a place for like people in debt to come work as indentured servants?
It started as a penal colony. Yeah. So what they basically did was all the people who are in debtors' prison, yes, who couldn't pay their debts and who are in debtors' prison in England. A guy by the name of James Oglethorpe, that's his name, James Oglethorpe. He decided it would be a great idea because these people were not what society necessarily deemed dangerous criminals. These are just people who can't pay their bills. These are just poor people. So his idea is if you give them a second chance, if you give them a little bit of land and another opportunity, these people can definitely make something of themselves. We should at least try. That's his idea. So he brought a lot of, they were prisoners from England over, and he established Georgia. It is starts as a penal colony to give this is his quote, not my words, his words, worthy poor a second chance. I don't know what makes you a worthy poor person, but he had qualifications, I guess. In 1733, a band of about 120 colonists founded the city of Savannah. They use it essentially as a buffer against Florida because Florida belongs to Spain. And so they established Savannah as sort of a buffer in between the English colonies and Spanish Florida. Basically, he wanted to set it up as, this is another one of his quotes, a common man's utopia. There is, originally when they found it, there is no alcohol allowed in the colony of Georgia, none. No alcohol. There is also no slavery allowed in the colony of Georgia because his focus was specifically to give these people another chance. And he thought allowing them to become slave owners and slave traders was definitely not a worthy second chance.
What's his name again?
James Oglethorpe.
Thank you.
I know it's a weird name. However, things changed over time. I mean, it's a good idea, right? I mean, noble intentions and all, but things changed over time. And within about 20 years of the founding of Georgia, they allow slavery and they allow the import of rum. So that changes. The original intent, I think he had good intentions. It couldn't last that way. They couldn't make enough money just farming and trading. And so they ended up resorting to slavery and drinking, of course. Okay. The last one I want to tell you about is Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was settled by, who knows, who established Pennsylvania?
William Penn?
Yes, William Penn, exactly. Pennsylvania translates to Penn's Woods, technically. is what Pennsylvania means. So William Penn was a Quaker. So let's talk a little bit about Quakers really fast before we talk about Pennsylvania. They are a group of religious believers in England. The technical name of the Quakers, that's not the official name of the religion. The official name of the religion is called the Society of Friends. Isn't that nice? I think that's so nice. The Society of Friends. I think that's just so nice. However, they earned the nickname Quakers because, does anybody know? Anybody ever been to a Quaker service? Anybody ever been to a Pentecostal service? My great grandfather was a Pentecostal preacher. So we had to go to his church a lot when I was a kid. Scared the bejesus out of me. Whew. It was a lot. Like they spoke in tongues, and they like would fall out with the Holy Spirit. And there's a lot of running around and shouting and hand raising and I don't know. I went to a Baptist church mostly growing up. And so it's a complete 180 from a Baptist service. Let's put it that way. In my church growing up, if you raised your hands while the music was playing, people would look at you like, don't do that. But we would go to my great grandfather's church. And if you did not raise your hands or stand up or shout, then they looked at you like you were weird. So it's totally different. But it's a little similar to the Quakers because they're called Quakers because when they would hold prayer meetings and religious services, people would say they would literally quake with the Spirit of the Lord. So they would like shake and, full of the Holy Spirit, and they'd show it. So they earned the nickname Quakers. That's how they got that name. We've had 2 Quaker presidents, actually, weirdly. You may want to venture a guess on those 2 presidents who happen to be Quakers. It's very uncommon. Anybody want to guess? I don't care. I know you don't care. That's okay. Herbert Hoover was a Quaker. And Richard Nixon is a Quaker, or was a Quaker. So, I don't know. Okay. Do with that what you will. If you're ever on Jeopardy and that's a question, just give me a little wave. You're welcome. That's for free. You got that. Okay. So the Quakers don't really have a sort of like a hierarchy in their church. They don't have like a set preacher. They mainly just have group meetings, and if you feel led to speak or to preach or to pray, then you do. That's basically what it is. It's very equal opportunity religion, basically. Okay, anybody can worship. They're very open about it. It was one of the things that made them very unique when they first came to the colonies, because they allowed Native Americans to come in, and the few African Americans who were there, they allowed them to come in and worship with them whenever, which was very unique to the situation, because most like Puritans for sure would never have allowed something like that. Pentecostals would certainly never, Presbyterians never. That's not something they would have ever thought to do. So they're very unique that way, very equal opportunity. The Quakers are. Okay, so William Penn takes an opportunity. The deal is the King of England owed William Penn's father a lot of money. And so in exchange for repayment of that debt, William Penn takes land as payment, land in the New World as payment for the debt the king owes his father. So they gave him essentially Pennsylvania. So he comes over, he establishes it. He wants to set it up as a refuge for members of his faith. and other people who are persecuted for their religious beliefs. So they're fully open to other religions as well. They're just a very equal opportunity kind of people. Pennsylvania. So he comes over with his people. Pennsylvania, Penn's Woods is what that is. So some of their beliefs include there's no difference to people who they thought were above them. So they didn't say things like Lord or lady or thee. They would only say thee or thou. They don't call people lords and ladies because in their opinion, everybody was the same. So they didn't use signifiers to like let you know that you were above everybody else. So it's sort of in the beginning a religious experiment because they wanted to know if everybody could live together in harmony, them and people of other faiths and the Native Americans and the Africans who all live there. So it's sort of this utopian ideal is what they're going for here. They do things like they settle disputes by arbitration. They don't have any sort of court system either. It's a group decision made up of both Quaker people and the Native Americans. They included Native Americans in most of their major decisions, which completely helps them in the beginning because the Native Americans who live there are way more likely to help the Quakers. Quakers are pacifist. They refuse to take up arms against someone else. That's still a tenet of Quakerism. If you get drafted, if they ever start the draft again, and you get drafted, and you can refuse to serve if you're a Quaker because Quakers are pacifist and they refuse to take up arms. So same with Amish and Mennonite and there's another one, Mormons. So all of those groups of people, if you're any one of those faiths, you can legally not have to join the army if there's ever a draft. So just in case, there you go. Okay. Anyway, that is Quakers and Pennsylvania. So that's how Pennsylvania originally gets started. And like I said, they originally spoke German. The Pennsylvania Dutch are not technically Dutch, they're German. So most of the people who lived in Pennsylvania, and if there's still any old school Pennsylvanians, like original people there, they more than likely speak German. Okay, we talked about this, talked about this. I know we talked a little bit about the slave trade. We already talked about that a little bit. Your book goes into a lot of detail about the Caribbean colonies and the founding of the different colonies and their ties to slavery. We talked about Barbados. We talked about the sugar plantations. I think so I think one of the last things I'll do today, and I think we would mostly be caught up through the end of almost middle way through chapter 6, is the differences in the types of slavery that are in the colonies. And your book does actually a really good job of detailing in each specific area of the colonies, what type of slavery is in each area, because it differs by region. They talk a lot about how in New England, they don't really need a lot of African slave labor because they're not really growing much. The food that they grow is only enough to feed themselves. The economy of New England is essentially trade. It's all trade. It's fishing, and there's port cities like Boston. Boston's a huge port city. Mainly how they make their money is through trade and making ships and barrels and stuff like that to support the trading. So there isn't really a lot of need for African slavery. If the Africans who are there are mostly artisans, they help in specific areas like they make barrels, or they're blacksmiths, or they are tanners. You know what a tanner is? Come on, y'all seen The Witcher? You should know what a tanner is.
Working with leather.
Yes, like somebody who makes leather, exactly. Things like that. Or the women who are there, African women who are there, they're mostly household slaves. They work in the homes, maids, and take care of children and things like that. So it's very different than Southern slavery. Southern slavery is almost the exact opposite. There isn't really a lot of trade going on in the South, but there is a lot of agriculture happening in the South, right? So let's talk about the differences in the Southern slavery system. So you have Southern slavery, you have the Upper South and the Lower South. So different types of systems. The Upper South, basically, they're replacing indentured servants with African slaves. That's basically what they're doing. These people are more house slaves, to use a terrible term, house slaves. Small groups overseen by a master, like a white master is essentially what that is. And a smaller percentage of the population in the Upper South. The Lower South, we're talking like Georgia, the Carolinas, eventually Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, this whole area right here. They use something else. They use something called the task system, which basically means you give each slave a task. Each day they have a set task. Once that task is completed, for the most part, not always, but for the most part, once they have completed that task, then their work would be done for the day. And then they could live their own life. That makes it sound like you have to pick, 100 bushel of beans, and then you can have the rest of the day off. No, it's not like that. So we're talking like the tasks that they are given are huge. They're ridiculously hard things to do, impossible things to do. So they got very little time to themselves. It's not like, when we talk about the task system, it's not like, oh, I did my to-do list for today, and so now I'm going to go hang out at home. That is not what we're talking about here. That's definitely not what's happening. But the thing is, the task system does give the Africans in the Lower South a little bit more autonomy, because they're not living in the home with the people who own them. They technically have their own, when I say homes, they technically have their own homes. I didn't bring up my PowerPoint. I'll go through it on Wednesday. I'll bring it up. I have pictures of slave living quarters. You can't call those things homes. They're shacks at best, for the most part. But they have a little bit more autonomy, which means that the culture of Africans that they bring with them and that they institute once they come to this new place, the culture that comes out of the Lower South is really rich and really varied, and becomes the foundation of what makes the American South, essentially. We're talking about the food that they make, the religion that they practice, the music that they sing, the daily rituals that they observe, become really interwoven into the American South. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so we've got, I think, okay, so differences between the South and the North are pretty clear when it comes to the types of slavery that they practice And they're all for very specific economic reasons, right? The North is not growing a lot of food. They can't. First of all, they don't have the room. And second of all, the soil is not really meant for that. It's not good for that type of situation. The South, on the other hand, is completely based on agriculture. So that requires a lot of slavery to make that economy work, basically, is what's happening here. Okay. The next sort of stuff that we have to get into involves around like religion and the Enlightenment and all that kind of stuff. And so I think, and Ben Franklin, I love talking about Ben Franklin because I think he's hilarious. First of all, he's fantastic. You know, the reason they didn't let him write the Constitution is because they were afraid he would put jokes in it. He was a funny dude. And apparently a real ladies' man. I don't know how that worked. Maybe it's one of those like he's got a good personality situations. I don't know, because I certainly don't find him very attractive. But he was a well-known ladies' man. He got around a lot. I have a book by Ben Franklin that he wrote while he was at it's a collection of essays that he wrote while he was at the Constitutional Convention. And it's a collection of about 18 essays about how fantastic it is to fart. That's just the kind of guy Ben Franklin was. I think that's hilarious. And they're really funny. They're actually really funny. The name of the book is called Fart Proudly. Yeah, I don't know. Okay. It was written in 1774. So, okay. Anyway, so I think the next set of stuff we have to talk about is the Enlightenment, Ben Franklin, and the Great Awakening, that kind of stuff. And then Wednesday, we'll also talk a little bit about the Salem witch trials because I don't want to just skip it. It's fun to talk about. And then the different areas of the colonies. And then we'll talk about the readings too. You have 2 readings for this week, 2 articles. One is The Creed by Jill Lepore, and the other one is The Prodigal Daughter by Jill Lepore. So those 2. And then your quiz number, what, 5, 6, I don't know, 5 is due Wednesday. And then there's also a discussion post for this week. Don't forget about your discussion post. Okay, does anybody have any questions before we conclude for today? I'll open back up the quiz for last week in case you didn't get a chance to do it. I'll open that back up for you guys. But is there anything specific you guys need or questions you have of me? I'm going to assume that's a no. Okay. I'll hang around for a few minutes if anybody has questions, but other than that, I think I'm done for today.
Thank you.
Have a good day.